Welcome, traveler. Tonight we do not walk the golden paths of heroes. We follow the tides and those who stayed behind. This is the tale of Elarion, a mariner of the Falathrim, one of the last elves who chose not to sail west. He tends the forgotten lighthouse of Nindamos, where waves echo names that history has long buried. But when black sails rise in the south and the sea calls something ancient back to the shore, Elarion must decide if he will fade with the world he loves, or light the flame once more. Before we begin, subscribe to Nightfall so you don't miss out on our amazing stories. The sea sang to him, but the words had long since faded. Elarion stood at the top of the lighthouse tower, his silver hair braided loosely down his back, sea wind tugging at the edges of his worn cloak. Below him, the waters of the Bay of Belfalis churned gently in moonlight. Not stormy, not calm, only watching, like a beast that no longer hunted but remembered. Nindamos was quiet. The village had once housed hundreds of his kin, Sindar, Falathrim, a few of the last Teleri who had lingered east of the sea. Now, it was stone and salt, broken by ivy and gull feathers. The great harbor was half swallowed by the tide. What ships had remained after the second departure had long rotted in the sand. Only the lighthouse stood tall, and only Elarion remained. He tended the flame twice a day, at dawn, to catch the breath of the sun, at dusk, to remember. The fire was not of wood or oil. It was drawn from a silver lantern shaped like a seashell, bound with thin ancient wire that shimmered when touched. The flame of Nindamos, it had once been called, a gift from the Lady of the Sea, Winen, so the tale said, a blessing to keep the shadows away from the shores of the elves. Elarion knew it was older than he was, and he was very old. He struck the crystal rod against the lantern. It flickered, once, twice. Then it sparked to life, soft, silver blue light, quiet as moonlight on calm water. The flame drifted, not bound by gravity or wind, dancing just above the lantern's shell. He watched it for a long moment, then sighed. The light was dimmer, not fading exactly, but distant, like a star seen through storm. He turned from the lantern and descended the spiral stair, boots echoing softly against the smooth white stone. Below, the base of the tower opened into a broad chamber filled with relics of a time no one spoke of. Sea charts inked by hands long gone, pearls carved with Falathrim runes, fragments of old harps strung with sea silver wire. He passed them, all without glance. He had looked at them for centuries and they had nothing left to say. Outside, the tide had risen. The water lapped at the old causeway, half covered in foam. Seagulls circled high above. The sun had begun to set behind the mountains of Lebanon, casting long golden lines across the coast. And then he heard it. A horn, faint, distant, not elven men. He narrowed his eyes and turned toward the sound. 3 riders on black horses approached. From the ridge road, cloaks drawn tight, swords at their sides. Their banners bore the sigil of a silver star over a white tree. Dunedain they dismounted without words. The eldest, tall and weather-worn, bowed his head. Lord Elarion of the Falathrim? Elarion inclined his head in return. I've not been called Lord in an age. The ranger stepped forward. We seek what you protect. Elarion's eyes flickered. The flame, the tower, or the name. The flame of Nindamos still burns, he said quietly. But it does not call to men. It calls to what hunts men, the ranger replied. He held out a scroll, sealed in silver wax. Elarion opened it. Inside, a map, and a sigil drawn in. Black, a sail marked with a symbol long thought buried with the seas of Numenor. An eye wreathed in flame. The corsairs had returned. That night he stood at the top of the tower again. The flame flickered. Below, the Dunedain made camp. They spoke in hushed voices, respectful but urgent. One of them, a younger man with dark braids and a harpoon strapped to his back, kept looking up at the tower. Elarion did not acknowledge him. Instead, he watched the horizon, and he dreamed. He saw white ships sailing west, their sails filled with golden wind. He saw his brother Kalter looking back only once before stepping aboard. He saw his own hands, clutched tight around a stone railing, unmoving. He had chosen to stay, and now. The sea was rising again. At dawn he packed. He took the lantern, a blade wrapped in oilskin, a carved conch given to him by a Maya he once thought might love him, and a small pouch of salt gathered from the deepest tide pools. The Dunedain waited. At the shore, their ship ready. He approached slowly. The younger one spoke first. "You've seen them, haven't you? The black sails?" Elarion nodded. "They dream loud." He stepped onto the ship without ceremony, and for the first time in 500 years the last elf of Nindamos turned away from his lighthouse and sailed east. The ship cut through the waves like a shard of starlight. It had no name carved into the wood, no flag fluttering from its mast. Only a silver symbol etched into the prow, the white tree, leafless, ringed by 7 stars. Dunedain, old blood. Descendants of kings who walked in shadow and fire. Elarion stood near the bow, cloak wrapped tightly around him. He did not sway with the motion of the sea. He had once danced across the masts of swan ships, barefoot in storm, laughing into the wind. But not today. Today the wind carried no joy, only warnings. The flame rested in a sealed box of greywood, locked with bands of mithril and lined with cloth that shimmered faintly in moonlight. Elarion had wrapped it himself, using techniques that dated back to the Second Age. Even so, he could feel its heat through the lid. It was dimmer, flickering, not dying, but growing restless. "You talk to it," said a voice behind him. Elarion turned slowly. The young harpooner, the one with the dark braids. He stood barefoot on the deck, balancing easily against the tilt of the ship. Elarion raised a brow. "I speak near it. That is not the same. But it listens." "Yes, it always has." The harpooner folded his arms. "My father used to say, the flame was the last gift of the sea, that it was alive." "It remembers," Elarion replied. "That is enough to call it alive." The harpooner nodded slowly. "They call me Terran," he said. "You?" Elarion's smile was faint. "Am Elarion, or was?" Terran hesitated. "You're not anymore. I left that name in the water." The days blurred into grey salt mist and creaking wood. The ship moved steadily south along the coast, slipping past forgotten watchposts and weed-choked harbors. At night, they saw no stars. Elarion spent his time near the flame. He did not open the box. He didn't need to. He could feel it like a heartbeat beneath the deck. Sometimes warm, sometimes cold. Always watching. One evening, as the ship passed the cliffs near Old Dol Amroth, the wind shifted sharply. The clouds parted for a moment, and far on the horizon they saw it. A ship. Black sails. No flag. Terran spotted it first. He called out to the crew. The captain, an older Dunedain named Halamir, brought the vessel into a shadowed cove beneath an overhang of rock. They waited in silence as the black-sailed ship passed like a ghost. It did not slow, but it turned, and for a moment its prow faced theirs. Then it vanished into mist. That night, the flame grew hot. Elarion sat beside the box in the cargo hold, watching condensation form along the mithril bands. He reached out. His fingers hovered above the lid, and a voice whispered in his mind. "You should have gone west." He pulled back, not fear, grief. He had heard that voice once before, long ago in the silence of Nindamos, when the last swan ship had vanished into golden light. His brother Kaltaya. The next morning, the ship sailed into a gentle bay and dropped anchor. Halimir approached Elarion with an old map, pointing to a location called the Forgotten Shore, a place where an ancient shrine of Weenen was said to lie, half buried in coastal earth. He believed the flame might be reawakened there, Elarion agreed, but something gnawed at the edges of his senses, a presence, familiar and wrong. Later that evening, Elarion descended into the hold to check the flame again. The box had been opened. He froze. The lid was slightly ajar. The cloth lining was wrinkled. The flame was gone. No, not gone. Moved. He turned. Terran stood at the edge of the hold, eyes wide. "I didn't take it," he said quickly. Elarion narrowed his gaze. "Who did?" I don't know. But someone's been whispering at night. I thought it was the sea, but it's coming from Meren. Meren, the quiet one, always in shadow, always watching. He had said little since they sailed, but he had eyes too old for his face, and when Elarion searched his quarters, he found a shard of black glass wrapped in linen, elven glass from the west shore of Numenor. The black line Halimir confronted Meren on the deck. The man did not resist. He said nothing. He only stared at Elarion and said, "You kept it, you fed it, it should have been ours." Then he smiled and leapt into the sea. They searched for hours. They found no trace. The flame still burned, but Elarion could feel it now. Dagholder, hesitant, not broken but uncertain. Terran sat beside him as they watched the stars return overhead. "He's not the last." Elarion nodded. "No." Terran looked down at the sea. "What do we do?" Elarion touched the box gently. "We go where the flame can grow." The shore came into view just past dawn. Mist clung low to the water. Grey stone rose from the surf like the backs of drowned giants. What had once been walls and pillars now leaned sideways, half swallowed by sand and root. The forgotten coast. Even. The waves broke softer here, as though afraid to disturb what rested beneath. The Dunedain ship lowered anchor a mile offshore. The crew prepared rowboats. Elarion stood at the prow, the locked grey wood box at his side. Terran approached and offered him a hand down into the skiff. "You've been here before," he said. Elarion did not answer until they touched water. "Not with my feet." They rowed. In silence. The tide pulled at the boats, not fiercely but deliberately, as if the shore itself wanted them near. Above, gulls circled but did not cry. Elarion's eyes fixed on a crumbling tower just beyond the beach. Its base was drowned in moss, and barnacles clung to its eastern wall. Just above the green line, a symbol was still visible, a curling wave beneath a silver star, the mark of Weenen, the sea herself. They made landfall with care. Halimir ordered half the men to form a loose perimeter, while the others carried supplies up the beach. Elarion took the box and walked ahead alone toward the remnants of the shrine. His boots touched stone steps carved with shells and vines. Each step brought a memory, not his, but old. Children laughing in the surf, swan ships at anchor, elves singing by moonlight. He touched the walls. They pulsed faintly beneath his hand, not with magic, with remembrance. Inside the shrine, the sea had carved away most of the roof. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the marble, casting shifting beams across the floor. At the center lay a bowl-shaped altar, crusted with salt. Elarion placed the box upon it and opened the lid. The flame flickered, not wildly, but as if it recognized the air. He unwrapped the cloth, letting the silver light spill across the altar. The flame hovered. It was brighter now. It spun slowly in place like a star adrift on the tide. He knelt, not to pray, to listen. Behind him, Terran stepped into the ruin. "You feel it too, don't you?" Elarion nodded. "She sang here," he said quietly. "Weenan?" Elarion's eyes stayed on the flame. "Yes, long ago, when the Eldar still watched the shores." Terran approached slowly, gaze drawn to the flame. "I thought it would burn hot, like fire, but it feels cool, like starlight." "Why?" Elarion smiled faintly. "Because it is not made to destroy. It's made to endure." The light pulsed. Elarion looked toward the altar's edge. A carving had revealed itself, one he had not seen before. It showed a hand, not a human one, but longer, elegant, an elven hand. Beneath it, the same shell-like vessel that held the flame. The hand released it into water, and from the water rose vines. Growth. Elarion's voice grew quieter. "It was not meant to protect us from the sea." He looked at Terran. "It was meant to teach us how to stay." Later that evening, they camped near the shrine. The crew gathered driftwood. Terran built a small fire near the cliffside. Elarion sat beside the flame, now returned to its box, and wrote in an old journal of sea bark and bound hide. His elvish script was curved and slow. He wrote of how the light had not waned. He wrote of Uinen's voice. He wrote of staying, but far off. From the edge of the northern dunes, a figure watched, wrapped in dark cloth. Hooded, hands burned from the touch of false relics, eyes that remembered elven flame and believed it belonged. To them Meren had returned, and he was not alone. The morning came grey and heavy. The surf rolled in slower. The gulls were gone. The wind brought with it not salt, but dust, the kind that clung to the folds of a cloak, to the crease of a blade. Elarion sat atop the half-crumbled shrine wall, the flames box resting beside him. Below, the Dunedain tended to their camp, sharpening weapons, boiling sea grain, checking the boats. Terran stood at the edge of the water, harpoon in hand, watching the waves. It should have been a peaceful dawn. It was not. The first sign was a footprint. Terran found it in the sand beyond the perimeter, too large to be his own, too deep to belong to someone barefoot. It hadn't been made by one of them, and it had not been made alone. Halamir drew his blade. 3 scouts were dispatched. Elarion gathered the flame and prepared to move inland. But before they could retreat, the figure stepped from the dunes, alone, clad in black and grey, sand trailing from his cloak like smoke. Meren. He raised no weapon. He simply looked at Elarion and said, "You left the gate open." The Dunedain surrounded him, blades drawn, but Meren did not flinch. "I did not come for war," he said calmly. "I came to speak." "You leapt into the sea," Halamir growled, "and it carried me home." Elarion stepped forward. "What is your name?" Meren's eyes burned. "I told you." "No, your true name." Meren tilted his head. "Names are layered." He stepped forward once more. "My father was of the faithful, my mother of the king's line, the other line, from Umbar." Halamir spat. "A black Numenorian." Meren smiled. "I am both." He looked at the flame, still sealed in its box. "That relic was made by your kin," he said to Elarion. "But it was fed by mine." Elarion's voice was quiet. "You twisted it." "No," Meren said. "I kept it. I believed in it. When the West abandoned us, I stayed. You stayed to conquer. I stayed to remember." Terran stepped between them. "You killed your own. You tried to take it." Meren's gaze didn't waver. "I tried to wake it. And now I offer peace." He removed a cloth from his belt and unwrapped its contents. A stone, shaped like a shard of obsidian. Its surface shimmered. Elarion recognized it instantly, a piece of the drowned altar of Andunia. A relic of the last light of Numenor. I found it beneath the sea, Myron said. The flame responded to it. He held it out. To you it is a weapon, to me it is a bridge. No one moved. Halamir's blade was still drawn. Terran's fingers twitched. But Elarion stepped forward. He looked at the obsidian, then at Myron, then at the others, and he reached out and took the shard. He did not thank him. Myron did not smile, but for a moment the tension ebbed. Myron turned and walked back toward the dunes. He left without a word. Later that night, Elarion sat beside the flame. He placed the obsidian shard beside the lantern. The flame pulsed, not brighter, but steadier. He closed his eyes, and for the first time he understood. The flame was not only elven, it was part of every shore that chose to protect rather than conquer. And Myron, in all his arrogance, had seen that too. Terran sat, down beside him. You could have ended him. Yes. Why didn't you? Elarion looked out at the sea, because not every shadow must be slain. The sea changed, not in color, not in sound, in presence. As the ship slipped past the edge of the forgotten coast and into the channel beyond Belfalas, the waters turned smooth, too smooth. No wind, no birds. Only the slow ripple of oars and the creak of the hull as it strained against a current none of them could see. Terran had never known the sea to be silent, but Elarion had. He stood near the bow, one hand resting on the flame's box, the other clutching the shard of obsidian Myron had offered. The flame had not dimmed, but it had grown. Still, listening. By mid-morning, the fog arrived, not low but tall, reaching toward the sky like columns of smoke from unseen towers. Halamir ordered sails furled. They moved by oar, slowly, eyes searching for landmarks that did not exist. There's an island here, Elarion said. The captain frowned. There's nothing on the charts. Elarion's voice was soft. That's because it hasn't wanted to be found. The mist thinned just enough to reveal jagged shapes ahead, not cliffs, but reefs, tall as towers, formed from broken masonry and coral-covered statues. Faces, half eaten by time, hands raised toward a sun that no longer remembered them. A ruined isle. Its name was whispered in old Falathrim songs, Semendil, the Isle of Drowned Songs. The ship could go no farther. The crew moored her between two stone pillars. That might once have been part of a gate. Elarion took the flame's box and stepped into the skiff. Terran followed. Why here? The younger man asked. Elarion didn't answer immediately. Then he said, because this is where I last saw him. Your brother? Elarion nodded. Kaltair. They climbed through seaweed-stained archways, across tiles etched in stars. Moss clung to every edge. Shells cracked beneath their feet. Here and there, carvings still whispered, not in voice, but in suggestion. A harp, a wave. A swan Terran knelt by a toppled plinth. These are elven, he said. Elarion nodded. The last ones who stayed. At the center of the isle was a pool, still, round, black as night. The walls around it were etched with runes from 3 languages, Quenya, Adunaic, and Sindarin. The meeting of shores. Elarion knelt at the pool's edge. He opened the box. The flame rose. For the first time, it drifted, not upward, but outward. It floated across the pool like a pale star, pulsing, and the pool answered. Visions rippled across the surface, ships of white and gold, sailing west into a sky of fire. Elves standing on green cliffs, their hair kissed by salt wind. And then, a boy Elarion, standing beside Kaltair on the shore of Nindamos, his brother smiling, holding a carved seashell. Come with me. But he does not move. Kaltair walks alone into the light. Elarion remains behind. The vision faded. Terran had seen it. Too? His breath caught. You stayed, he whispered. Elarion nodded. I couldn't leave the flame. I thought it needed me. He looked up at the glowing lantern. But maybe I needed it. The flame pulsed once more, brighter, then dimmed. Not in fear, in rest. It had shown what needed to be remembered, not to wound, to release. They returned to the ship in silence. That night, no one slept. But none of them dreamed either. Only the flame, and it dreamed of green shores. The wind returned on the second morning. It came gently at first, a soft breeze curling through the sails like a breath from the deeps. The fog over Kemendil receded. The reefs grew still, but the flame did not rest. It hovered above the shrines. Deck unboxed, now unbound, spinning in slow pulsing arcs. Not wild, not broken, waiting. Elarion stood before it, arms bare, eyes closed. He wore a tunic woven in the style of the old Falathrim, sea-thread silver, star-stitched along the collar. Around him, the others watched in quiet awe, but kept their distance. They had sailed far, yet he had traveled farther. He opened his eyes and stepped into the circle of light. The world shifted. The air around him thickened like water. The stone beneath his feet disappeared. He stood in darkness, not black but deep, like the space between waves beneath the surface. There were no stars here, only shapes, soft outlines of tall, cloaked figures. Some bore harps, others held lanterns. None had faces, but they were singing. The song came not in words but in pull, a melody that reached through marrow and memory. He felt his breath slow, his heart steady. And then from their center came one figure that was not like the others. It was taller, thinner. Its cloak shimmered like light seen through waves. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere. You carry the last of what we shaped. Elarion bowed his head. I do. You bind it with your will. You guard it with your grief. He looked up. I kept it alive. Why? Elarion swallowed. His voice was quiet. Because I feared what would be lost if I let go. The figure stepped closer. You, fear fading, he nodded. I was left behind. You chose to stay. Elarion did not deny it. I did. Then choose again. The light swirled. A shape formed in the air, his own body standing on a shoreline. Behind him, the flame. Before him, a white ship with sails billowing in a golden wind. On the deck stood Kalter, his brother. The sea was calm. The figure asked, You may take the ship, you may be forgiven. You may pass beyond all sorrow. Will you go? Elarion stared. The flame pulsed behind him. He turned his back on the ship and walked toward the fire. The cloaked spirits bowed. The tallest raised a hand. From the shadows, something floated forward. A new vessel, not the old lantern. A bowl, of woven crystal and pearl shaped like a leaf riding a wave, the true heart of the flame. The voice spoke again. It will burn so long as you do. He took it in both hands, and the world returned. On the deck of the ship, the crew gasped. The old box lay empty, but above Elarion's palms the flame had changed. It was no longer silver alone. It shimmered with green and gold, the colors of life and light, the light of those who chose to stay. Terran stepped forward. What happens now? Elarion looked east. We sail into shadow. That night the wind carried them faster than before. The stars came out, and for the first time in many years, Elarion sang, not to the sea, but to the shore. The waters grew darker the closer they sailed to Umbar. Gone were the white gulls and silver fish of the western coast. These seas held no voice, no life, no witness, only the slow churn of iron keels cutting through deep channels and the creak of ships that should have long sunk beneath the waves. The corsairs patrolled the horizon like vultures with sails. Their flags bore no eye, no flame, not anymore. Instead, they flew a twisting silver mark, crude but familiar. Terran pointed at it from the rigging. "That's a perversion of the flame," he said. Elarion's jaw tightened. "No," he said. "It's bait. They want me to see it." The Dunedain ship kept low and silent. They traveled by starlight, hugging the coastal cliffs, turning into a thin sea channel just before dawn. This route did not appear on Gondorian maps. It had not existed to men for hundreds of years, but Elarion knew the way. He had sailed it once with his brother, before the sea took him west and left Elarion to count the waves. He stood at the prow, guiding the vessel through jagged reefs. Terran joined him. "Where are we going?" "To a place built by hands like mine." "Another shrine?" "No," he pointed ahead. "A city, Lotharneth. That was its name, once sung under starlit domes and echoed down marble canals. A seaport built by the Falathrim beneath the cliffs north of Umbar, long before the black sails ever rose. Half of it now lay sunken beneath the sea. The rest slept under coral and bone. It was here Elarion would bring the flame, not to destroy it, but to lay it down. They entered the broken harbor just past nightfall. The cliffs above shielded them from view. The corsair fleet remained focused on the northern straits. The ship drifted through narrow arches choked with kelp and shattered pillars. Broken statues watched them pass, elves with harps, sea beasts with open mouths. A great tree split down the center. They moored beside a fallen tower. Elarion stepped onto stone. It felt warm. Inside, the city still breathed. Water lapped softly in sunken halls. Old murals shimmered beneath moss. Shells lined the edges of a broken courtyard, arranged in spirals, not by hand but by the tide. Terran followed him closely. "You lived here?" Elarion shook his head. "No, but I carry what they left behind." They reached a central chamber, where light filtered through a broken dome. An altar stood at the heart of the room, empty, waiting. Elarion opened the crystal vessel. The flame rose, it hovered above the altar, and the sea grew quiet. Above them, ships moved. Corsairs. 1. Then 3. Mehran stood on the deck of the largest, his hands behind his back. He watched the city from afar. He knew where they were. Terran ran into the chamber, face pale. "They've seen us." Elarion did not panic. "They would have found us eventually." "So we fight?" "No." He looked up at the light of the flame. "We finish." Halimir gave the order to prepare the ship for immediate retreat. The flame must not fall into their hands, but Elarion remained in the chamber. He placed the crystal vessel in the center of the altar. It pulsed once, then again. A low, deep rhythm, like a breath returning to a long-dead heart. Around them the ruins shimmered, not visibly, but in feeling. Terran stepped back. "What's happening?" Elarion did not answer, because he was listening to voices in the stone. To waves that remembered. He turned. "They're coming," Terran said. Elarion nodded. "Let them." The corsairs landed at twilight. 3 ships, black-sailed and weather-scoured, slipped into the harbor with unnatural silence. No drums, no shouts. Only the groan of ropes and the hiss of wet boots striking ancient stone. Elarion stood in the center of the ruined hall, the flame pulsing above the altar. Terran and Halimir had taken positions at the outer arches with the rest of the crew, arrows notched, blades drawn. But Elarion had given one command, clear as salt air. "No one strikes unless I fall." They didn't understand, but they obeyed. Mehran entered alone, cloaked, hood drawn back, his hair braided with strips of black cloth. On his chest hung the obsidian shard, now cracked, and his bare hands bore fresh scars. He moved slowly, with the measured pace of a man not uncertain, but unwilling to rush fate. He stepped into the circle of light. The flame did not recoil. It hovered, spinning, still waiting. "You followed me," Elarion said. Merrin gave a slight nod. "No, I walked the same path, just slower." He looked around the chamber. "My ancestors stood here, you know, not as guests, as captors. They took what you left behind. They tried to remake it, burn it into shape." "And failed," Elarion said. Merrin smiled faintly. "Of course, because it wasn't meant to be wielded." He stepped closer to the flame. "And yet, here we are." The Dunedain stirred. Terran whispered to Halimir, but neither moved. The flame pulsed again. Elarion raised his hand, and Merrin stopped. "Why are you really here?" Elarion asked. "To finish what neither of us began." Elarion's gaze did not waver. "You came to take it." Merrin shook his head slowly. "I came to let it go." He removed the obsidian shard from around his neck and placed it at the base of the altar. Then he knelt. The flame dimmed, then pulsed warm. "I wanted to believe we were owed something," Merrin said, eyes on the stone floor. "That our line, our pain gave us right to its light, that we were the broken ones, the castaways. And now," Elarion asked, "now I see we were never meant to bear it." He looked up. "But you were never meant to bear it alone." Silence hung in the chamber. Elarion stepped forward. The flame lowered between them. It hovered just above their joined gaze, then split, not broken, shared. One light drifted toward Elarion, one toward Merrin, each smaller, each softer, but neither dimmed. Terran exhaled audibly. Halimir lowered his blade. The corsairs outside waited, but when Merrin emerged from the ruin, he did not call them in. He raised his hand and lowered his flag. That night, the sea calmed. 2 flames now burned in the temple. One silver gold, one silver shadow opposite pieces of a once whole light. Elarion sat beside Terran on the broken steps. "I thought I'd destroy it," the elf said softly. Terran shook his head. "No, you saved it." Elarion looked up at the stars. "No," he said. "I let it be what it is." The sea knew him, not just his face, not just the shape of his footsteps across the deck. It knew the rhythm of his breath, the way his voice bent when he sang to the waves, the stories he carried in silence. Elarion stood once more at the prow of the ship, the wind brushing pale hair across his face. Behind him, Terran held the tiller steady. Halimir watched the coastline with quiet reverence. Before them, rising from the water like a memory made real, Nindamos, the lighthouse, stood, as it always had. Its white stone shimmered in the late afternoon sun. Ivy curled higher along its base than before, and gulls had made their nests in the upper alcoves. But it remained, unbowed, unchanged, waiting. They made landfall with care. No words were spoken. The crew worked in silence, as if they knew they were stepping into something sacred. Terran helped Elarion down from the ship, steadying him. The elf's arm was still wrapped in cloth from the fire. The burn had healed, but the skin bore no color now. No mark, just pale silence. Elarion looked around. The port was overgrown, the pathways narrow with grass, but the stones remembered him, and so did the light. He climbed the tower alone, not to escape, to say goodbye. Step by step, he passed murals of stars, of ships, of swans in flight. He paused at the one carved with his brother's name, hand brushing it gently. At the top, the lantern chamber sat quiet and dark. He opened the old brazier and removed from his satchel a single shard of crystal. Not a flame, not magic, just a remnant, a memory. He placed it in the center, and for a moment, nothing. Then, a soft flicker, pale, steady, a light not meant to burn forever, just long enough to show the way. Terran joined him at sunset. He leaned against the railing, arms folded. "So, what now?" Elarion smiled. "I stay," Terran frowned. "You're not coming back." Elarion looked out at the sea. "I was never meant to leave." He nodded toward the flame. "That will guide others now, but I've done what I was called to do." Terran swallowed. "We could use someone like you." Elarion smiled again, faint and full of peace. "I think you already have." They embraced once. Nothing needed to be said. And when the Dunedain ship turned east the next morning, Terran stood at the stern, watching the lighthouse shrink into the horizon. He would later tell his children that he saw something then. A single figure high on the tower, bathed in starlight, and beside him, a second light floating soft and free. So ends the tale of Elarion, last of the Falathrim. He did not sail west. He did not burn. He stayed, not to guard a relic, not to hold back the tide, but to show us that sometimes the greatest choice is to let go and light the way home.